Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Gosh, and speaking of thank you, great big thanks to Pal for allowing me to teach this evening. Really appreciate that opportunity. And of course, appreciate everything that they do for the artistic community here in Ottawa. And a great big thank you to all of you tonight for showing up. We have incredible numbers for this, which is great. I'll share my theory as to why I think that is a little later on. Before we get into the bulk of what I'm going to teach you tonight, which is basically the fundamentals of screen-based storytelling, whether you want to write a one-off TV show, a TV series, or a movie, because we'll be looking in tandem more or less at all three. I have a little bit of housekeeping, just a little bit of housekeeping. All right. First of all, Zoom. This is the first time I've ever taught on Zoom. So don't presume that I know Zoom because I don't. But I'm hoping to, kind of get through it as best I can. Got some wonderful co-pilots, thanks to Pal, and hopefully all this will go swimmingly. What you're mostly going to get tonight is me yakking. So it'll be akin to if you've taken those master classes that are offered online, where you pay $200 and it's you get a subscription, and you could have Steve Martin teach you comedy, and you could have Martin Scorsese teach you filmmaking, and you can have everybody teach you anything, and it's mostly just a lot of this. But because these speakers are entertaining and you know that they come from a real place professionally, it all works. And hopefully you'll get that same effect from me tonight. That said, I do have a couple of things I want to put up, the odd film clip and some worksheets that I think will really, really help you guys in your writing as we go forward. That said, there won't be any actual formal writing tonight. It's not like we're going to have little breakout rooms and everyone's going to write while I sit here and kind of wait for you to grind something out. It's mostly talking about writing, me handing you the fundamentals. But that said, with the worksheets that I'm going to show you guys to develop your plots, your characters, what have you, right after this session, we're going to find a way with Pal to post that so that you guys can have access to it. So, for example, it may go up on their website. I think that would be the likelier place. And as well, hopefully, I'll provide some links to some other resources. I'll cut and paste those in the chat box. So you will go away with a bit of a toolkit when this is all over. Kind of like when you go to the dentist and at the end he hands you a little goodie bag. It's got some stuff in it. It's going to be like that. All right. All right. I have taught this class many, many times.
That's really low.
Sorry, what are you talking about?
Would you rather save the drinks?
Okay, we're back on track. Warned you guys about Zoom. It's tricky. It's tricky. All right. So here I am back chatting. Now, like I said, I have taught this class many, many times, and at Algonquin College for 15 years and in other contexts. So I know the content quite well. That said, on occasion, you are going to see my eyes dart off a little bit like this while I cheat a little bit and I check my notes. So I'm going to try to keep mostly focused on you guys, but every now and again, I hope it's not too disconcerting. Going to be a little bit of that. All right. It's kind of akin to coming to see a musician and the guy's got the, sheet music in front of him and he knows what he's doing, but every now and again, got to look at the sheet music. So I'll be looking at the sheet music every now and again, hopefully not too often. All right. Chat box, we talked about that. Big numbers tonight. This is the Woodstock of screenwriting courses. It's screen stock or something like that. And if we unmuted everybody, there'd be so much talking, you would probably not get anywhere near the amount of content I'm hoping to give you guys. So as a result, there's a universal mute going on. But as David said, feel free to contribute to the chat box. Periodically, I'll stop. And again, providing I know what I'm doing, I'm going to check the chat box, scroll for some comments. Won't be able to answer everyone's queries, but I'll get to a select few and hopefully be able to give you guys answers to your questions. All right. A lot of you are aspiring artists and or veteran artists. So it is possible that you have dabbled in this kind of stuff before, which is narrative storytelling, either for the screen or in some other context, theater, what have you. So some of this might be old hat for you guys. If it is, I apologize. That said, the rudiments of writing, are the rudiments of writing, and they're pretty much universal. They go across a lot of stuff. So it's inevitable that some of this is probably going to have a deja vu vibe to it. But, feel free at any time to leave if you think it's become a little too familiar. But that said, I have read what I think is probably literally every book ever written on writing for the movies and television. Every year I go to chapters. Of course, now with COVID, it's a different story. But I go to chapters and I get all the latest ones off the shelves and I comb them all. And I can assure you, year after year after year, it's the same information. All right. So I always say, why am I bothering to read yet another book about this? But then up in every single book, there's that one line, that one little piece of advice that is going to change your writing forever going forward. And you go, that's why I bothered with all this stuff, because there was that little nugget that I needed that is gold. And hopefully, if tonight is a little too familiar for some of you, you'll stick to it and you'll find that little truffle underneath all of the dirt. All right. All right. I think that's all the housekeeping we need. So that said, I think we're ready to get down to the nitty gritty. Everybody ready? All right, here we go. Again, tonight we're going to talk about TV and we're going to talk about film, and we're going to talk about the rudiments of writing for both of them. I only have so many resources, so many worksheets, all that stuff. So you guys might want to be taking notes as we go, either by hand or on your computer or whatever your preferred method is. All right. We're going to look at all the components. So here's kind of a little sneak preview, kind of like when you go to the movies and there's coming attractions. Here's the coming attraction of what we're going to learn tonight. All right. We're going to start off with what makes a good premise. Everybody and his brother and or sister and or distant cousin has had that thing where you go, geez, what would be a really great idea for a movie? Blah, blah, blah. And you got that idea. And that idea is stuck in your head. And that idea is going to be there a long time. And periodically, you're making dinner, you're walking down the street, you're putting your mask on, whatever. And suddenly that idea comes to you again. You go, man, that would be a good, I'm just reminded of what a good idea that I should really write that idea down. Excuse me. But you never actually get down to writing it down. Very, very, very few people get down to writing it down. And then one day you're sitting in front of television or you're going to the movies and you look at the screen and you go, oh man, that's I had that idea back in 2000. That's my idea. Oh man. And you start asking, well, how come they wrote it and how come I didn't write it? The reason you didn't get it was you didn't write it. You weren't first one to the North Pole, if you will, was that you didn't know how to do it. You didn't know how to spin that premise out into a proper TV series or a proper movie. And because you didn't have the technique, you got scared and you didn't do it. Or you started it, you tried it, and then you stopped. And because you only knew a little bit of the technique, but you didn't have enough of the technique. It is amazing. And in fact, it's a standing convention in the screenwriting industry that people who first start out, traditionally, let's say you're writing a movie, which is 90 to 120 pages, get to page either 20 or 40 of developing their idea. And then they go, hey, yeah, I'm just going to put this in the bottom drawer. I'll get back to it later. And and they never get to it. And it's because they don't know how to come up with the right kind of premise that will allow you to go all the way to page 90, page 120. Because not any premise will do. Any premise will do when you're writing a novel. I don't know if you guys know a great writer by the name of Nicholson Baker. If not, look him up. And he is a guy who once wrote a novel that was at least 300 pages long. And here was the plot. A guy goes up an escalator and he has a glass of milk. That's it. I forget the name of the book, but that was the entire book. And it's fascinating. It's about all the thoughts going through this guy's head as he rides the escalator. It's about him pontificating on the nature of milk, whole big thing on milk production. And, in a novel, anything goes. It's a very broad palette. But if you're going to write for TV and movies, the rules are such that, good luck if you're going to go into a producer's office and you're going to pitch a guy going on an escalator and he gets a glass of milk. They'll throw you out so fast. It won't be funny. Why? Because it's not the right kind of premise for TV or the movies. You'd write that, you get to page 20, you'd get to page 40, you'd put it in a drawer, end of story. You got to keep going, all right? So I'll teach you guys how to come up with the right kind of story so that it's conducive to going all the way to the end, all righty? So we'll take a look at that. Then we'll look at the popular ways that you can fashion a plot. I'm going to put up some worksheets, hopefully, and you'll see two systems whereby you can use these worksheets and the ideas incorporated in them to develop a proper plot, to spin out a plot. So again, you won't get lost. You'll know how to go from A to B to C to D to, E and F. That said, the methods I'm going to show you guys aren't the only ones. They're two very, very popular ones. Don't get me wrong. One of them is probably the single most popular one in world history, and it's still going very strong today. And you'll realize that when I show it to you, we start talking about it. But there are other methods. So I'm not giving you guys anything definitive. I'm just giving you two out of many perspective tools, but two very, very good ones, particularly if you're an entry-level writer, all right? So we'll take a look at that. And then how to spin good scenes out of your plots. Because once you got a plot, you got a story, that's great. Now you got to break it down into scenes. What are the components of a good scene? How do I make sure this scene works? It builds, it advances the story. It gets us going somewhere. It doesn't drag the action down. It's still conducive to character development. It's still got the audience totally involved. It still makes sense. People could follow the story, right? So teach you that. And then after that, after the dramatic build of those scenes, how to write good dialogue. A lot of people fall down there. That's a very, very common falling down point. And a lot of people don't know how to write good dialogue. There's a standing theory that it can't be taught. You either have this capacity or you don't. I've never subscribed to that. And while I think it's true that some people have a better ear than others, again, going back to a musical analogy, some guys need the sheet music. Other guys can play by ear. They got a great ear. They can pick up everything. Some of us have voices running in our heads at all times. Someone says something on a bus and we remember it, and we remember just the way they said it. And 5 years later, it's still in our heads and we can still spit it out to somebody. So we have a better ear than the average person. But that said, even if you don't have that, you can still learn to write effective dialogue. And I can teach you guys how to do that. Stuff that's colorful, stuff that's punchy, stuff that moves, all right? Because TV and the movies are very much like a shark. If it doesn't move, it's dead, okay? So you want to make sure you keep the shark afloat. Very important. And then we'll get into formatting. Sounds fundamental, but a lot of people don't know how a screenplay is written because it doesn't look like a book. It doesn't look like a short story. It doesn't look like a play. It's got its own formatting. And I'll even give you guys some resources, links to resources that make that so easy it's not funny. When I started out back in the dinosaur age, it was still typewriters. And the formatting for a TV script or a movie script, oh my God. I think Zoom's a headache. You get cursing here, you gotta set things here, you gotta, oh no. And if you made a mistake, out comes the whiteout, and oh my God. But now there's all this software, excuse me, some of which is free. I'll show you guys that basically click, 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 click. Hey, look, I wrote a script. Real easy, all right? And then we'll finish off with a little marketing. I'll give you guys a little bit of knowledge of what to do once you've written something. So, hey, Dan, thanks for teaching me the rudiments. I think I've got a pretty good script here. Now what the hell happens? Well, here are some places you can go to. Knock, knock, knock. Hi, I'm a guy trying to get into the industry. I got a script here. You want to read it? Where people might actually take a look at it and give you some bona fide advice or maybe even a job. Who knows? All right. So that is a lot to cover, as you can appreciate, in a short amount of time. But I'll do what I can, including accommodating the chat. All right. So here we go. Going to start off with a little comparison between film and television. Not very long. Once upon a time, film was it. When it came to screen-based storytelling, it was the absolute ultimate. Biggest screen, biggest budgets, biggest stars, biggest everything, and it was like the product. Past, I guess you could say, decade and a half, the comic book generation has hijacked more or less that far. So 90% of the movies today, excuse me, are made for the following demographic: young males between 18 and about 28. These are the guys who will go see Superman 12 times and the next Batman 16 times, and they'll buy the t-shirts and they'll buy the toys and they'll stream it and they'll buy the DVDs. And so this has taken over the whole shebang. Guys, my racket, you might go see that stuff, every now and again if you're my age bracket, but you don't want to sit there and it's loud and you can feel your fillings rattle when the Batmobile goes off. And you're like, oh man, really? So, you leave saying, hey man, where's classic drama? Where the movies used to be? Where's good stories about people and interaction and drama? And then suddenly you look at television, excuse me, particularly the streaming networks, and you go, there. And the streaming networks very wisely have realized that there's a lot of people out there, very wide demographic, I think mostly the PAL demographic and a bit younger, that, the explodey movies, maybe every now and again, something big and mindless, sure, why not? But they're not going to go week after week after week, and they're not going to buy the toys and the t-shirts. And at the same time, network television, the odd good show comes, but how many times have you gone through it and said, 110 channels and there's nothing on? So they know that there's a healthy demographic out there with an appetite for good screen-based storytelling, caught between a rock and a hard place. So the streaming networks, which is, your HBOs, and then spin that out into your Netflix and your Disney Pluses and all those guys, that's going to proliferate like crazy. It's going to go boom over the next little while. There's going to be a ton of them. They've realized that they can do something right in the middle, that they can make the kinds of movies that the way movies used to be in the heyday of, say, the 70s and 80s, that it can be adult in content, that it can be intelligent, that it can be good people stories, that it can have all the good versions of what I told you guys we're going to learn as this course progresses. Oh, it's got an interesting premise. It's got good characters. It's got great dynamics. It moves well. It's intelligent. It's interesting, etc. All right. So that's mostly the market that we're going to write for. John Cassar, I don't know if you guys know the name. He was a local boy, grew up here in Ottawa, went to Algonquin College, their TV broadcast program in the 80s, graduated, went to Toronto, had some successes there in TV, made his way to Hollywood, and made a very big splash some years ago when he was the showrunner, which means both the producer and the writer, and in his case, the director, of the hit television series 24. And when he won an Emmy for that show, he came out and he said, I want to tell everybody that we are living on the cusp of the second golden age of television. And I went, I don't know, really? And he knew something I didn't, being an industry insider on a much deeper level, that all these streaming networks were coming and all this great stuff was going to just explode. And he's a big part of that scene now. And he was right. So that's what we're going to largely write for, is this exploding market. That's why I suspect in part we have such a big turnout tonight. All right, 63 right now and counting, which is great. Because you guys, you've always had an idea about writing. You've always thought about writing. But, there's got to be a demand. And now with all of these streaming things popping up, you guys are, oh, wait a minute. There is a demand. There is this great big machine out there that's just going to take on a lot more component parts as we go along. And it's going to need content. And you got the CRTC telling these Netflix guys and all of their brethren, hey guys, it's got to be Canadian content. Oh, okay. So the Netflix of the world are actually putting out feelers. They just had a big contest where they said to everybody at large in Canada, hey, if you're an experienced, even if you're an amateur screenwriter, send us your stuff, and if we like it, we'll talk. Window's closed on that now temporarily. They've picked what they're going to pick, but they're going to do it again. Other guys are going to come into the market, and they're going to do it. So we're going through a phase now, industry-wise, where, screen-based storytelling, let's call it screenwriting, the old word, has become kind of the new gold mining in the arts. I was lucky enough to be involved in the independent film boom when that happened in the late 90s. Everybody and his brother suddenly, thanks to, the homogenization of the technology, could make a movie. You didn't have to go to Hollywood. And then maybe a film festival would pick it up and they would play it. And my stuff ended up in film festivals in Toronto, Montreal, Palm Springs. I was very lucky to be a part of that. But at that time, there was the same energy and the same everybody wants to get in on it, the same gold mining mentality, because there was a demand there. And then it kind of went fallow for a little bit. It all kind of dried up. Television, same thing. Reality TV came in. Hey, hey, the people go on TV for nothing. We don't need you writers. Get out. We can do a talent show, or we can make them do the Amazing Race or whatever. Fine, a lot of people left the industry at that point, but a couple of people kept saying, at some point it's got to swing back. It's got to be an appetite for storytelling again. That's fiction based. And sure enough, if you waited long enough, it took about 15 years. Boom, pendulum swung back, and here we are now with this great big market looking for scripts. So you guys are all in a very good position. If you could learn to develop your ideas, if you could learn to take the tools I'm going to give you and fashion them into something professional looking, you got a shot. All right. So that's good to know. All right. How's that shot start? Now we get to the nitty gritty. Starts with this. You know what this is? It's not a figure that was in an industrial accident. It's a hook. Starts with something called a hook. I'm going to talk about this a lot. The hook is the first major baby step that you need on the path to developing a script. All right. I talked about this so much one time in a class that a student at the end of it said, I got a printout for you. And she gave me a picture of me that she had photoshopped as Captain Hook. Because I kept talking about the hook, the hook, the hook. But I explained to her, I said, look, I know I overdid it, man, but it's because it's important. It's the first building block you need. It's the foundation. If you don't have this, don't even bother going to go see anybody who might produce what you got. They don't want to hear from you. Unless you've got a strong hook. You need a hook, all right? So what's a hook? Surely there are people out there with musical talent. And you know that in musical parlance, a hook is essentially the earworm of a song. So it's that little riff, usually part of the chorus, that you can't get out of your head. It's the central musical idea the composer had when he sat down to write the tune. So you could bet that if you're looking for a hook for Beethoven's Fifth, da 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 da, and everything spins out from that, and eventually goes back to da 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 da. All right, all the way to I was gonna say the Beatles. I think it's a Little Richard song, Dizzy Miss Lizzy. Just that little central idea, the hook. All right. And when you write, it's the same thing. Your premise is the hook. It's a little novel idea that makes people want to see the movie or the TV series. Well, we'll get to the TV part of it a little bit later because there's an interesting variation on the hook for TV. But in movies, it's the concept, a little fundamental concept that you could pitch in one line to a guy with a lot of money who could underwrite your idea if he likes it, if he really likes your hook. And I can assure you, and I've been to big places, I'm not saying this lightly, I'm saying this instructionally, places like Hollywood, excuse me, and I've met name producers there, and they've always said the same thing. A guy once said to me, he said, look, I'd rather have a great hook from a crappy writer than a crappy hook from a great writer. Because I could buy that guy's great hook, and I could give it to a great writer, and he could make that movie great. So at the fundamental level, the entry level, they don't buy scripts. Don't bother coming in with your 240-page whatever. They could care less. They want to know you got a great hook. They buy hooks is what they buy. And they worry about story after they get the hook. Give you an example of hooks so you'll know what I'm talking about. Just need a little water here. There's a hook right now. I'm taking off my editorial head. Not saying this is a good hook. Not saying this is a bad hook. Saying it's a hook. There's a movie out right now with Robert De Niro called The War with Grandpa. Let's say I'm going in to pitch The War with Grandpa. Producer says to me, okay, your title, War with Grandpa. What's the hook? I say to this guy, a kid is so upset that he has to share his room with his grandfather that he stages this reciprocal war against him. Already I could hear this producer guy going, yeah, okay, all right. Tell me more. What do you got? So I got him hooked on this idea. That's all you want is a little idea like that. But it's got to be one that's going to make people go, oh, I'll go see that. The hook itself is enough. Don't go in and say, it's an idea where I've got a janitor and he falls in love with a cleaning lady. That's not a hook. That's just a bunch of characters destined to interact in some way. That might be a dynamite play. Sounds like off Broadway to me. Depending how you dress it up, might even work in a TV context. But if you're writing a movie, which is what we're doing right now, you don't come in with that because that's not a hook. All right. Here's another one from a couple of years ago. Pretty good movie by a guy called Alexander Payne, who at one point was married to Ottawa girl Sandra Oh. And it was a movie called Downsizing. I don't think it did a lot of business, but it was a terrific hook. And the hook was to combat overpopulation, a family volunteers to be shrunk down to a 6-inch height. Well, you can bet if you pitch that to a producer, the guy's going to go, oh, yeah, okay, so how does it work? So you got a good hook there. It's a great hook. One from 2016, I remember seeing it going, of course this got made. Of course this got made. Was a movie called The Meg. Now, The Meg was about a team of underwater people who find that a prehistoric shark is still at large. This gargantuan shark about the size of your neighborhood that everybody thought was extinct for thousands of years is back and wreaking havoc on everything in the ocean. Well, I remembered thinking, man, that is the ultimate producer erection. I mean, there's just no way that movie wasn't going to get made. Think about it as a hybrid. It's Jaws and Jurassic Park together. How is some guy in Hollywood not going to subsidize that movie? Well, of course he is, because the hook is just so good. And even if the guy's story development was crappy, you can bet the producer would say, here's your money, go away, thanks for the hook. He'd give it to another guy and he would develop it, all right? I met a guy once, producer in Hollywood, reputable guy, had done lots of stuff, and he had this hook that he wanted developed. And his hook was that there was a guy who was madly in love with a girl, and as he left her apartment, he saw the girl, who was kind of depressed, commit suicide. And as she threw herself out of a building, the guy was a photographer. He took out his camera and he went, wow, and took pictures of her all the way down, splat, and then sold the pictures. And this producer was obsessed with, what kind of a guy would do that? Like, you're madly in love with someone, but then when she kills themselves, like you're the first thing you do is, you don't try to save her. You're not brokenhearted. You take a million pictures of her. You try to sell her. Like, can you work with that? Can you? Well, it's not a very strong hook. It's kind of wonky. Certainly not The Meg or Downsizing or The War with Grandpa. But, this guy was dead set on getting this hook produced. And every writer he met, he'd come out with and we'd all meet afterwards and say, oh, did you meet so-and-so? Yeah. Did you give that hook about the, yeah. But, the point is, that's how much these guys hold these hooks dear. It's a very, very big thing to them, all right? Another illustrative anecdote. I knew a guy once, and this is back in the early 80s or late 70s. Dolly Parton had yet to make a movie. She was very, very popular at the time. Everybody was dying to put her in a movie. They didn't know what kind of movie to put her in. And this guy went to see a producer, and the producer said, look, man, I got 20 minutes for you. I got 20 minutes. What do you got? And the guy said, yeah, I'll give you my story in a second. Oh, hey, look at that. Look at this great picture of your kids. Oh, your little guy plays softball. You know what? My little guy plays softball. That's great. So they talk about softball for a little while. The guy says, okay, now you have 10 minutes, and then I got to go. 10 minutes, wise guy. The guy's like, yeah. Oh, look at that, a mounted fish on the wall. You know what? I was in Florida, and I hooked this pompano once. And so they talk about fishing. This goes on. And finally, the producer gets up and says, okay, look, I got to go. You got 30 seconds. Now's the time, or forget it. And this friend of mine, a bit of a cocky, wise guy, who believed in his hook very much, so much so that he could play this game with his producer, said to the guy, okay, all I have is the poster. The guy said, the poster. The guy said, yep, picture this. You got Dolly Parton in a police uniform, one button down to here, and the poster says Dolly Parton busted. Now, that's probably the worst idea personally I've ever heard. But this Hollywood producer guy went, oh, that's great. And he gave this guy $250,000 to write 3 drafts of this movie, Busted, that thankfully never got made. All right. Again, why do I offer that story? One, it's kind of cute and funny. It shows you how Hollywood works. But two, just to show you once again, call me Captain Hook, if you will, but the hooks are very important to these guys. Very, very important. All right. So much so that now they become titles often. And they become titles because everybody wants to be top of mind on Google. Excuse me. You want SEO to find you. So often, you need SEO, plain language. And so often the hook becomes the title. Most obvious example from a couple of years ago, snakes on a plane. Not a lot of people going, geez, I wonder what that's about. Snakes on a plane, That's the hook. People are stuck on a plane seeing their snakes. What are you going to do? Jump off a plane? You're stuck with snakes. And it's the title. Another one was a comedy, Horrible Bosses. Gee, I wonder what that Horrible Bosses movie is about. Well, it's obviously about, So it can even be your title, all right? So keep that in mind when it comes to crafting, a title. If you got a strong hook, would probably make a strong title. Now, what constitutes a strong hook? You want something so strong, and it happens periodically, people will go to see the movie even if it gets universally bad reviews. So people say, yeah, I know everybody hated it. Rotten Tomatoes said it was the worst thing ever made. But I really kind of like the idea. I'm intrigued by the idea. So I'm gonna go anyway. Like a good hook does that. It'll supersede even things like that. All right. So what you want is your hook that's got that novel little idea. That's a very much a movie premise, but at the same time suggests good characters, that there's going to be conflict, that there's going to be roles for stars, and that there's a paying audience that will definitely go and see this. So you can bet if I come in and I say The War with Grandpa, producer guy is going, yeah, okay, I could see a big name playing Grandpa, maybe a hot kid star as the kid, so I like that. I certainly see conflict. You got Grandpa and you got the kid and you got the war. The parents are going to be involved. So, okay, you got a lot to work with there. I like that. I see characters. I see conflict. And a paying audience sounds like a family movie to me. And family movie, man, that's 4 tickets. That's mom, dad, and 2 kids going. That's 4 times the money that I'd make from a single admission. So, yeah, tell me more. So you want the kind of premise that is elliptical, which is to say that it's pregnant with all of these juicy movie producer things. Don't go thinking these guys are artists. They're not. They're capitalists. The nice thing about streaming TV, it's got a bit of a brain to it, which is nice. So you can actually pitch something that's not necessarily lowest common denominator, something that's up a little bit, like Bridgerton, Queen's Gambit. These things, you'd have a hard time getting these things done as movies because they're like, it's not broad enough. It's not commercial enough. It's not big enough. But for a streaming service, would work fine. All right. Okay, brings us to television. Here's the variation on the hook on television. And that is that in TV, the hook is the milieu. It's the world. It's the environment in which the action, the story takes place. So on network TV, it's a lot of the very common ones. Billion shows set in a hospital, billion shows set in a cop shop. How many sitcoms have you seen in a family home? Almost every single sitcom has somebody at home because they want people to be able to kind of more or less relate to, the tenets of civilization. All right. But when you're dealing with streaming networks, let's say Netflix, HBO, those guys, this is a very interesting variation on it. What you're offering people is a glimpse into a secret world. The hook is the secret world. I'll give you an example. 2 hottest shows on Netflix over the past little while. I think both were on Netflix. One currently is Bridgerton, if you watch that show. If you don't, you should. And another one was a great series called The Queen's Gambit. What did anybody know about either of those shows before the whole world watched them? The answer is nothing. Did you know who was in it? No, not really. Did you know who wrote it? No. Did you know who directed it? No. What did you know? Did you know who the characters were? Not really. What did you know? You knew the world. You knew what the world was. Oh, I get it. Bridgerton. This is about kind of a catty, classy world of Regency era England. Oh, okay. That was the hook. Oh, what kind of people lived in those days? What kind of situations did they get into? How are their mores and folkways different than the ones we have today? Were they the same? Only they were in powdered wigs? A lot to work with there. All right. What was the other one I mentioned? The other one was Queen's Gambit, of course. Queen's Gambit. What did you know about that? It's about the international world of competitive chess. Really? How does that work? What kind of people do that? And what are the politics of that? And what kind of people are gravitated to it? And you're even fascinated by how do they make that a TV show? How do you take something that kind of, I don't know, boring, nerdy, and spin it out into a drama? So that's the hook. The hook is the world if you're going to write for TV. Look back at the very first one that spawned the whole thing going to HBO, which was The Sopranos. We're going way back to 2000 when that debuted. A little sooner, I think. And what made The Sopranos a hit was the world of everyday gangsters, their everyday lives in suburban New Jersey. You know, marginalized worlds are good. Worlds on the periphery are good. So everybody kind of knows this is true. You know, there are guys out there who are gangsters and probably live in New Jersey. But I don't know how they are every day, who they are and how they act with each other and how they fool the world otherwise. And so you're fascinated by that. You're going to go and watch that. Again, you know, the world is the star. It's a very, very big hook. I had one for years that I never developed. And I thought I should develop this. It was in part inspired by a show that was hot at the time called 6 Feet Under. And 6 Feet Under was another one of these hidden world things. We all know there are people out there who work in the funeral business. Odds are pretty good we don't know them personally, but gee, what are their lives like every day? Why do they do this job? What experiences did they have that led them to that? How do they interact with each other as a family? What goes on behind the scenes at a funeral parlor that I probably don't want to know about in terms of the professional ins and outs? Did they take the stuff home with them every day? How do they, a billion questions. And the show, in its own dramatic way, answered them all, and it was fascinating. And the one I had was grief counselors. So, there's a shooting at a high school, and a bunch of kids take out some other kids. Oh my God. And you hear about it on the radio, and they always say, oh, well, they're sending in grief counselors to deal with those people. And I'm like, wow, grief counselors. You hear about them all the time. Who are they really? What do they do? How do they get that job? Who are they dealing with every day? Again, what are their personal relationships like? Do they carry this when they get home? Are there people who they can't console no matter how much they try? Do they get emotionally involved with? I mean, they goes on and on and on and on and on. All right. If you want to go the sitcom route, if you want to write something more conducive to network television, and you want to go sitcom, it's the same thing. Like I said, you have kind of a more common world. So you're dealing with, a bar, like How I Met Your Mother or a Cheers. Might be dealing with a coffee shop, like Central Perk in Friends. Like I said, a lot of things take place in a home, everything from Last Man Standing to the new reboot of One Day at a Time, which isn't bad if you haven't seen it. Produced by Norman Lear, still at large, guys, 98. Amazing. More proof no one ever wants to leave show business, no matter what. Anyway. And so you find this common crossroads. It can even be one that's already happened, but as long as it's a crossroads where people can interact. And then you can say, okay, it takes place in a, coffee shop. People go, yeah, all right, kind of like Friends. I get it. Keep going. And then you can go on with the characters and all that stuff. All right. And then you got to find for your hook, once you've given them that geographic template, you got to find, a subset of characters that we'll get into this a little further as we go along, that are long-standing sitcom archetypes, but people are going to think they're new, that they haven't seen them before. So we'll get to that a little bit later on, all right? Because what you're offering people when you're offering them a television show, a movie, what have you, and if you go away with nothing tonight, go away with this line, which is you're offering them, and I quote, a safe passage through unfamiliar territory. So I'm going to watch The Queen's Gambit. This is about the world of international chess. How the hell? What? How does this work? My job as the writer is to take you, the viewer, by the hand and say, I know this is new to you. I know this is new. Don't worry, man. Don't worry, man. I got you. I got you. And I'm going to lead you through this so that you don't get lost. You could follow what's going on. You can learn the characters slowly as they develop. And I'll get you to a part where you'll go, ha! And even that, eventually I'll kind of teach you how to kind of handle that. So that's what you're handing people. It's another way of saying that you're handing them things because you're respecting the fundamentals of TV and film writing, things that they've seen a million times before, but you convince them it's new. So you convince them so much that they don't know that it's the same fundamental writing rules coming up for every single thing. All right. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. All right. So we've talked a little bit about hooks. I'm going to take a second here. I'm going to see if I can see the chat here. What do we got here? Excellent distinction of what a hook is. Thank you. Okay, that's good. I'm liking that. Anything else? Someone's got some trivia about downsizing. First developed 10 years before its release and shelved for several years before it was made. That is not uncommon. Brings up a good point. Don't go thinking that you could write something, give it to someone. They're going to say, great, and it's on the air tomorrow. Movies take a tremendous amount of time. They're in development forever before something happens. And often there's a happy coincidence where there's a movie being made, there's something going on in society, and people go, oh, yeah, well, that's because, see, Trump's on trial, and that's why, see, that movie plays into Trump being on trial. Well, when that happens, most of the time, that's a complete coincidence, because that script about some guy who's kind of like Trump on trial, that's been in development for at least 2 years or longer. That script has been going around for forever until it finally got made. And the fact that it just happens to dovetail into the zeitgeist, 9 times out of 10, it's this weird coincidence that keeps happening all the time. The only exception to it is occasionally you have made-for-TV movies or series that are already in production, sitcoms, that kind of thing, who can react to something like that very, very fast. So when the pandemic hit, you're watching TV, it's same old, same old. And then all of a sudden, oh, look at this. I'm watching an episode of Superstore, and all the characters who work in the store are wearing masks, and they're all washing their hands, and they're all talking about the pandemic. And they can do that because they're still in production while the pandemic's going on. So you can do that. They can do it really fast. But you can bet the movies, they can't do that. They can't say, whoa, somebody quick, write a James Bond movie about a pandemic, and let's get it out there. Holy cow, you know how long that would take? That script would be in development forever. The production values take forever. It's got to go through editing. It's got to go through marketing. It's got to come out, 2 years after the pandemic is over. Pandemic might still have an echo at that point, so it kind of looks like it ties in. But if it does, it's, more or less a coincidence because it takes that long for these things to happen. When I used to write for the animated series The Raccoons, and I was used to that point, the sketch comedy. You write something, you rehearse it, and that week you go on stage and see what happens. If people are going to laugh or not. Well, we'd write The Raccoons, we'd give it to the guys, and we'd see it 9 months later on TV. I was like, what? 9 months? What? Hey, man, animation takes time. It's a whole bunch of guys, especially in that era, pre-computer, sitting there doing all this drawing. I mean, it's a long, involved process. So, as somebody once said, I thought it was a very profound statement, applies to a lot of things, particularly true when it comes to TV and film writing. Slowly is the fastest way to get where you're going. So remember that, all right? All righty. We talked about the hook. now we're going to talk about your next thing. So you got your hook, and the guy says, "Wow, yeah, I love that hook you got. That's really, really cool. Grief counselors, all right. So what's the plot? What's the story? How do you, tell me more." These things, by the way, it's a common expression. They're called elevator pitches because you're in an elevator with a guy, and over the course of the elevator ride, presumes you won't get stuck between floors. The guy's only got the elevator ride for you to tell him the story. So you start with the hook, and if he likes it, you can get into it a little bit more. Here's what producers fundamentally want to see from you, all right? One, they want the hook. Two, they want to see, I'm going to say three. I'd say 2 to 3 really, really good, strong scenes. You can have a bunch of soft ones, but as long as you got 3, whoa, scenes, you're cool. And lastly, the ability to write dialogue. They want to know that you can write the dialogue. And if they're confident that you can do that, then you get to keep the job. If you fall down in any one of those areas when you give them the script, they're probably going to go, "Meh, thanks, here's your money. I'm going to give this to somebody else." And they'll give it to that someone else who's going to rewrite it and possibly end up being the person who gets credit for the whole thing. Credit's a very, very tricky thing. I think the standing rule is still whoever writes the most gets the credit. That's a very tough thing to prove sometimes. But it happens. The famous Dustin Hoffman movie Tootsie, it's famous for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons being that a billion writers worked on it. Everybody loved the hook. See, it's a guy who dresses like a woman and becomes a better man for having lived for a while as a woman. Everybody loved that. But nobody could make it work, and they brought in, Legend had it like 50 writers. And at the end, the Writers Guild said, well, we got to give credit to somebody here. What do we do? And so they said, okay, give us all the drafts. And this is pre-computer. So they brought in boxes and boxes and boxes of paper, and Guild people went through every single script and figured out who wrote the most. And the 2 guys who wrote the most got the credit, even though 50 people worked on that movie. And they won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. They themselves had never met. They met the first time on the podium with their little statues. And you bet there was 48 other guys at home going, "Ugh." Mordecai Richler very famously screwed himself out of an Oscar in the 50s when he was a struggling writer in Britain before he became a successful novelist, writing a very good movie based on a book called Room at the Top. And he wrote it, and some other guy wrote it, and some other guy just kind of had a few more pages than he had, and that guy ended up winning the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. Otherwise, today we wouldn't know Richler necessarily as a novelist. We'd know him as Canada's first Academy Award-winning screenplay writer. Anyway, all right, getting back to the hook. Somebody I know out there, very reputable producer, Sue Stranks, reminded me, thank you, Sue, that a hook is also commonly referred to as a log line. It's akin to, your IPG, your your interactive programming guide. You're watching TV and you scroll down and you see, or on Netflix, and you see, oh, what's the episode tonight? And it said, Bob and Bill go fishing and suffer a terrible accident threatening their friendship. It's just like one little line that explains the premise of that episode. So that's akin to a hook in that it's an episodic TV hook, which they call a log line. All right. So now I'm going to teach you how to take the log line or the hook and spin it out into a plot. So I have to go share screen here. Let's hope this works. Actually, before that, I'm going to show you a little film clip, and I got to hope this works. Speaking of novelists, we touched on Richler. This is an American. I'm sure most of you know him. Guy named Kurt Vonnegut. In case you don't, or you need a refresher, essentially a comic sci-fi writer who was writing about all kinds of things like the environment that became very, very fashionable later, but he had his finger on the pulse way back when the disaster was first unfurling after World War II. Very funny guy, very entertaining guy. And he took it upon himself back in the primitive days of computers in the 50s, as he was trying to understand story to get ready to write books, to take a whole bunch of common, well-known stories, legends, fairy tales, feed him into a computer so he could try to develop a formula whereby you can hand the formula to anybody and they could write a story. Kind of like what I'm doing with you guys with screen-based stories. So hopefully this will work. Shamila, let me know if it doesn't. But I'm hoping you guys can all see this. And here we go.
Has created a body of work of startling
No,
eccentricity.
hold on, Dan. So you have to press the bottom button. It's a green button at the bottom that says share screen.
Yeah, I did that.
Well, there's no reason why that simple shape of story can't be fed into.
And you should get one more prompt.
Oh, sorry. You want me to do? Oh, hang on. I got it. Hang on. Oh. Is it playing?
No, not yet.
It's not playing yet. I'm going to close it. I'm going to try again. For whatever reason, my share. Okay. It says share, but I don't know that it's working. Okay, hang on. I'm going to close this up here. Okay, well, I warned you guys we might have glitches. I warned you. I warned you. All right, you know what? Maybe we won't do that. You know what I'll do? I'll go, yeah, you don't need Kurt Vonnegut. You got me. Maybe what I'll do instead is I'll go right to sharing his template. So basically, I took his work and I changed it into a template here. Now, can everybody see my screen? You can see me and you can see my desktop?
Yeah.
You can? Okay, good. So Anne from PAL was very, very, very accommodating yesterday. And she took a lot of what I want to give you guys and turned it into a lovely PowerPoint. So I've got it now as a PowerPoint that I can share with you guys. The writing's a little faint, but I'll let you guys, I'll lead you guys through it. And please remember that these resources are going to be put up later on, probably on PAL's website. We'll keep you apprised. So
Dan,
you can
sorry,
have this as your very own work kit.
Sorry, Dan, at the very bottom, there's near where it says 68%, there's a little square. It looks like a.
I don't want to make it too big. I could probably make it about that big.
Yeah, or just left of that, there's that square with it looks like an easel.
Yep.
Yeah, if you hit that.
Oh, look at that. I didn't know you could do that. You learn something new every day. Perfect. Okay, so here's how Vonnegut, drawing from, many, many, many stories and legends, fairy tales, what have you, found a narrative template that runs through all of them. That, as he says, every time somebody uses this, they make $1 million. You're welcome to go make it yourself. So you start off, according to him, with this. This is you taking your hook and breaking it down to these component parts. My protagonist is, all right? So, hey, it's the war with Grandpa. Yeah, okay, so who's Grandpa? Spit him out in detail. What kind of guy is he? A little more. He's at war with the kid. What's the kid like? Spit him out a little more, all right? So you talk a little bit about your hero. You fill in a little about your hero. Here's a very, very important part, because this is the action that's going to propel your story. Excuse me. As you see here, there's a fundamental need on that person's part. What he or she wants is. When I first heard this approach to story, I thought, oh, that's so American and capitalist. It's all about what somebody wants, what somebody needs. It's so materialist. I'm a socialist. But you know what? In writing terms, I was like, oh, you can't not do it. Put your personal politics aside. You can't not do it. It's what propels the action. So think about the fundamental need that your character has. His or her big need. There's going to be one, all right? At the most fundamental level, the cop wants to catch the bad guy. In a romantic comedy, the guy wants the girl to fall in love with him. There's always a need there, all right? So think of what that fundamental need is, because that's what's going to move your story. Actors will drive you crazy with this question. They will drive you crazy with this question. You'll write a script, you'll write a scene, and they'll look at it and they'll say, I'm confused here. And you say, what's wrong? And the guy says, what does my character want? What do I want in this scene? What the hell am I going after? And you got to spell it out for them. You got to say, what do you mean you want? And they go, okay, I can play that. This makes sense. This is focused. So it's very important. I'm going to name drop for the first time. I had the privilege of writing a movie once that starred Terry Garr. Or she was in the film anyway. I've had a mad crush on her since I was an adolescent. I met her and it was the most anticlimactic experience of my life. But anyway, enough celeb gossip. She was in the scene and she was playing an agent. And she kept saying her lines. And you know what? On screen, she always plays this kind of ditzy sort of blonde who's like, well, she's pretty much like that in real life. And when you're on a set and time is money and she can't remember the script and she's all over the place. Now, in her defense, you know, she had flown in and there was an airline strike and she came and she was jet lagged and she hadn't eaten in forever and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, her natural frustration with some things while she works was exacerbated by extenuating circumstances. So cut her some slack that way. But anyway, so she was trying to do this scene where she played an agent and she was saying all these nasty things to her client. And finally she said, cut. And I was on the set that day, and writers are very rarely on the set. And I was on the set that day, and she looked at the director and she said, I don't understand this. Why am I saying all of these nasty things to these people who are my own clients? And the director kind of didn't know what to say to her. And he looked over to me like, you wrote it, wise guy, help me out. And I came up with the fundamental need or want of the scene. I said to her, because you love your children, but periodically they have to be disciplined. And this light bulb, bing, went on behind her and she went, I get it. And it was smooth sailing from then on. So she didn't have the want. She didn't know what her character wanted. So it's very, very important. It's going to propel all of your action throughout the story as a whole. And it's also going to propel each individual scene within that bigger arc. All right. Then Vonnegut gets to the setup. So the setup is how you set the scene. All right. So you know who your character is and you know what she wants. So now it's the setup. So now you can start thinking about, well, there's this kid. I haven't seen the movie, by the way. There's this kid and suddenly he's happy-go-lucky. And then something happens to Grandpa. Grandpa's got to move in. The only place for Grandpa to go is in the kid's room. The kid gets really ticked up. So that's kind of your setup. You get into the beginning. Then you get into the rising action. You get into how he's got it as a bell curve, how the action starts to go up the ladder, up the curve. Grandpa really gets mad and, or rather the kid really gets mad and then he starts sabotaging Grandpa. So he puts stuff under his bed and he puts stuff in his pajamas and then Grandpa in turn gets mad at him and he starts going, and then you get your major conflict. And then the parents get involved and they try to police it, but it's a disaster. And you can see how the action now is starting to rise until obviously, like any rising action, it comes to a climax. And you come to, remember I talked about how producers want to make sure that you can write big scenes. You come to the big scene. You come to the big climax. You come to the fork in the road. You come to the single biggest thing that can happen to your main character or your main characters. And that's what you want. So if you're a Jaws nut like I am, not the Meg, Jaws all the way. If you're a Jaws nut like I am, you know, they got to go out and they got to get this shark, even though they kind of don't totally know what they're doing. And whoa, now they've come face to face with this thing that's bigger and nastier than they could have possibly imagined. If I'm writing Ghostbusters, whether it's the Bill Murray version or the version they made recently with the all-female cast, you know, hey, we know what we're doing. We're Ghostbusters. Whoa, what's this? And now they come across this great big vicious marshmallow man and yikes, they got to deal with it. And that's the climax. The interaction that takes place over the climax, he calls falling action. Falling's a bit of a misnomer. He just means that you carry the action all the way through. So, yikes, let's go after the shark. So they go after the shark, they go after the shark, they go after the shark. Spoiler alert, they kill the shark. And with the act of killing the shark is the falling action. So you've kind of taken care of the action. All right. And then you have the resolution, a little emotional aftermath afterwards. Whew, man, that was terrible. Don't want to go through that again. Yeah, me neither. Roll credits. You can take this template and you can apply it to any story. You can apply this to Cinderella, which is what he does. You can apply this to, pick any Harry Potter book or movie. You can apply this to sit down tonight with this on your lap and watch any sitcom, anything that's on Netflix, whatever. And you can take apart anything you watch and you can break it down into this formula. All right. Now, here's the thing, however, and this is another piece of information you definitely want to take note of. In any major screen-based property, whether you're talking TV or you're talking a movie, you're not dealing with a single story. You're dealing with two stories, all right? They come in pairs, twins. You're dealing with two stories. Let's call them, for simplicity's sake, the A plot and the B plot, although you could also call them the main story and the subplot. Sometimes you'll notice there's even kind of a C plot, which is usually a little bit of colorful, funny business to kind of provide comic relief, break up the action, little extra info about the characters, whatever. But it's not really, what you'd consider a main plot. Your first plot is effectively an external plot because it's made of visible action. So I'm talking about Jaws. I'll go back to Jaws. What's my main plot? What's my A plot? Well, hey man, it's about this giant shark, and it starts terrorizing this beach, and you got this sheriff who, he's new to the culture, and he's like, yikes. And this oceanographer comes by, and he's a smarty pants, but he can't figure it out. So they got to find this salty, crusty old fisherman guy, and the three of them have to go out to get the shark. And the big want or need is they want or need to kill this thing that's going to eat their entire community and cripple them financially. Okay, so that's my A plot. That's my visible plot. My B plot, my subplot, is a plot that's not action-based, but emotion-based. Call it the emo plot if you want. So it's about one or more of the characters going through a major psychological dilemma at the same time as the action plot. And you take those two plots and you interpolate them as you go along. A little bit of A, a little bit of B, a little bit of A, a little bit of B, a little bit of A, a little bit of B, a little bit of A. Almost like you're building a sandwich. You're making layers like a sandwich. So if someone said, well, what's your subplot for your B plot for Jaws? I'd say, well, it's this sheriff and everything the guy's going through psychologically. He's new to the culture. He just moved over from New York City. It's the beach. The guy can't even swim. He's got a shark. He doesn't know anything about sharks. He's recruiting all these people. He doesn't know what he's doing. A kid gets eaten because he's incompetent. A woman slaps him across the face because she's now motherless because of this poor naive dope. Finally, by hook or by crook, he decides he's got to do this. Got to step up. Got to grow a pair. Got to go mano a mano with the shark. He even goes so far as to go out in the water with these guys. Hates boats. Doesn't know how the radio works. And that's my B plot. It's a psychological profile of this guy. It's his psychological journey, his emotional journey as we go through the whole movie. And like I said, you give people A, always start with A. You give people A, and then you give them a little B, and a little A, and a little B, and a little B. Why is the B important? Because the B explains to people why the A is happening. You ever watch a movie and all this stuff's happening, and you're like, yeah, it's great. It moves. It's terrific. But I don't understand why the characters are doing what they like. What's driving these people to do what they... Action's what you want. The need is what you want. But you have to explain psychologically why that need at that time in that story. All right. Another great example, great movie in 2006, if you haven't seen it, called The Last King of Scotland, about a notorious dictator in Uganda, Idi Amin, who was a crazy guy who, dictator and cannibal and did all kinds of outrageous things. They're still outrageous today. And you get to see him do all these outrageous, crazy, dictatorial things throughout this whole movie. And there's a B plot that's this big when he stops and he turns to somebody and he says, when I was in the British Army, man, was I mistreated. Guys would say, hey, go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. Look at me now. And then they go on with the action. Well, that's not much, but it's enough to tell you, that's why this guy does what he does, right? It's the motivation that actors are always talking about. Oh, okay, he was abused. He was a victim of racism, of colonialism, of the mentality that goes with the army. And he was like, man, someday I'm going to show all you guys. I'm going to show all of you. And he's consumed with anger and be power mad as a result of being emasculated for so long. And you get it completely. And so you see his psychological journey, his B plot throughout the movie, while he does all of his actions, and they're all motivated by that. And the press starts to say, hey, man, you can't do all these things. He becomes an international bad guy, but it's still him thinking, don't these people understand me? Don't they know where I come from? So that's very important. All right. So that's how, all of that to say, so you take your A plot, your action plot, and you put it through this template. And then equally, you take your B plot, your emo plot, whatever grandpa and the kid are going on through internally, and you put that through. And then you take those two plots, if you will, and you kind of cut and paste the A and the B together until you got a story that's at once an action story and a, lack of a better catch-all phrase, a people story. All right? Very, very important. Like I said, sometimes there's a little bit of C. You'll watch Modern Family or whatever, and you'll watch a little bit of a kind of a C plot that kind of happens. But the C, again, it's just a little bit of color, a little bit of comic relief mostly. Other very important thing you want to keep note of, now that you know that there's two plots, an A and a B, when you get to somewhere between the climax and the falling action, what you want is the A and the B to dovetail together. You want one to play into the other. All right. I'll give you an example of this, a great example that I saw on Big Bang Theory. They had the hook was, for that particular episode, the guys decide that they're not meeting women because they're scientists and there are not a lot of women in science. So they decide, you know what, we are going to teach today's young women that science is a worthy occupation to go into. So that was their hook for that episode. These nerdy guys are going to teach young women that it's worth going into science. Producer said, great, funny, love your log line, go write it. So they came up with the A plot. Meanwhile, their B plot, the plot that was emotionally rooted, the subplot, was that the girls on the show, the women on the show, were rivaling with one another about who was going to be the princess at a female stag party that was going to take place at Disneyland. I want to be the princess. No, I should be the princess. You're always the princess. I never get to be the princess. It was all very emo-based, emotionally based. And they cut between the two stories. They got to the climax, which is going to signal the falling action, and they got the A and the B and they put them together. The guys were in a classroom. They were in front of all these young girls, and they said, it's fabulous. Science is a fabulous profession for women to go into, and we're going to inspire you by showing you now live some very prominent female scientists. And they brought up a screen, and there were the three women having a fight over princess costumes at Disney World. And you could see all the girls in the classroom going, what? And the guys being totally embarrassed. Oh my God. And they had to work all that out with the girls, which constituted the falling action. So yeah, it was a very, very good example of the A and the B coming together, boom, at a point sort of between the climax and the falling action where there's a convergence point, A and B come together. Now, a lot of people say, now, wait a minute, Dan. I've watched some television and movies, but mostly TV, where there's an A and there's a B, but the A and the B never came together. I never saw A and B do this. I even wrote a movie once where A, B didn't come together, and people were kind of frustrated by it. They kind of didn't get how it came together. And the secret to that is, if they don't come together literally, they come together figuratively or ideologically, which is to say, put simply, they're about the same thing. In terms of theme, idea, they're about the same thing. All right. So I mentioned earlier a reboot of a 70s sitcom called One Day at a Time. It's on Netflix now. They've given it a Latino twist. It's not bad. Norman Lear's still behind it, which is cool. And I saw an episode recently. It's about a single mom raising her family, including her daughter. And the single mom found out at work that she was being paid less than her male colleagues. That was the A plot. The B plot was that the daughter refused to wear makeup. She was like, I'm not doing that. No way. I will not wear makeup. And the A and the B never really came together, even though they were both individually resolved through the climax and the falling action. But the whole episode worked because they were about the same thing. And the idea behind both of them was about the burdens that are put on modern women. You're paid less than men, and you're expected to be this makeup wearing babe. So because they were about the same thing, episode worked fine. So it's as if the theme, what you want to say, is the invisible spine of a show. You have to make sure that everything you write is about something. I always say the greatest metaphor for any piece of writing is the fortune cookie. And whatever you're writing, movie, TV show, book, you're writing a fortune cookie. You're making a fortune cookie. Something really enticing that when people look at it closely, there's a message inside. All writers, including you, whether or not you know it or you call yourself this, are moralists. You think you're writing because you got a cool hook or a cool idea for a character or a cool story. But yeah, you probably do. But what you also have that you're not maybe totally in tune in is you have something to say. Likely something you want to tell yourself that you also think is of value telling an audience. You can start with the theme. You can say, okay, I got my story, and I want this to be about how tough it is to live as a member of a family. Now, you could do that, and that could help focus you. Or if all you've got, I say all you've got, if you've got your major pieces, your hook and your, story all worked out according to this template, you'll find the theme as you go along. As you write, you'll go, oh, you know what this is about? I didn't realize this. This is about how you should let anger go or it's going to consume you. You know what I'm really trying to tell myself is I'm really angry at my wife right now. I've been angry at her for a week, and it's time I let it go. I didn't realize that was working inside me, but, the writing actually kind of revealed that to me. I've had that experience many, many times, and no doubt you'll have it too. So you don't really have to have your theme set out, but you can as a guidepost, or it'll come to you as you develop the story. Often you'll develop your story, you got your whole thing, and you're like, something about this is not working. And usually what's not working is your theme. What you want to say is not clearly defined enough. It's like somebody opened the fortune cookie and, whoa, I can't make out this writing. What's this supposed to be about? What is this telling me? So you want to make sure that the message is very, very clear. I've done that many times too. Showed it to my wife and said, what do you think? She said, what are you trying to say here? What is this about? She'd say, I think what you're trying to say is that all Republicans are jerks. I'm like, yeah, that's it. She said, well, then you got to make that more clear in the story. Oh, okay. And I'll go back to the beginning with that idea in mind, and I'll make sure, without changing too much, that idea comes across. Next time you're watching anything, TV, show, movie, whatever, think about it in philosophical terms. Look for the theme. Look for what it's about. Look for all this stuff, but also look for what it's about. Very important. Okay. I'm going to see if I can share something else here. How do I get back to where I was going? I'm going to stop share. There we go. I've stopped shared. I'm going to have a little peek at the chat in case someone's got something they want to say. Just finishing Bosch series. I don't know that one. Seems there are multiple plots. Probably an A, a B, and a C. So take a good look at that. Somebody said they can't see I can't see Dan, just the fill-in sheet. That's okay as long as you can hear me. The content's the star. The fill-in sheet can upstage me anytime. And okay, we're still going to go here. Next thing I want to show you guys is another story template, because if you don't like that one, you can try another one. If you're a fan of animation, you'll recognize this one pretty much. Now, how do I shrink this? Sharmily, how do I shrink this screen to show my desktop?
You just press the escape button.
The stop share button?
No, escape, like on the top left of your keyboard.
Oh. I've done that. Nothing seems to be happening.
Nothing seems to be happening.
Can I stop share and just start sharing anew?
It's just that you have to minimize your PowerPoint.
Hang on here, folks.
You should stop sharing, Dan, and then start on the new one.
I know that voice. It's the voice of God or a producer, same thing. Okay, hang on. I am now sharing my screen again. So that's not the one I want to share with you guys. Hang on a second. Okay. Now, how do I get out of this? Oh, here we go. Can you guys all see this?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I can see it and you can't.
Dan, you can just advance the PowerPoint using the little arrow at the bottom left of the PowerPoint. If you go back to the PowerPoint.
I think that's where I am, but I don't know whether or not you guys can see it.
No, we're
How's
not
that?
seeing it.
Can you see that?
No.
You can't see
You have to go back down to the
share
green button
screen.
at the bottom.
Share screen, yeah.
Okay, I'm going back to share screen here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
let's see if I can. Okay, can you guys see my desktop?
Yeah.
yep.
Okay,
Yep.
there we go. All right, I'll see if I can find, maybe I won't go PowerPoint, I'll just do this.
Right there, Dan.
It's gonna take a second here. There we go. Can you see all see this?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, another common story template. We finally got to it. This is attributed to Dan Harmon, who is the showrunner behind Community and Rick and Morty, which is why you see all these Rick and Morty characters here. And this, however, is an ancient story template that goes back to the beginning of time. It's based on the work of a very important ethnologist and story guru, a guy named Joseph Campbell, wrote a seminal book in the 50s called The Hero's Face of the Hero, or The Hero's Journey, something like that. Anyway, Hero with 1,000 Faces. There we go. Hero with 1,000 Faces. And he basically took every single story from the days when we would all sit around a campfire and tell each other the first stories, which were people who left their caves, went afar, and came back and said, "You wouldn't believe what happened to me when I went to the other cave." And took all of that and broke it down into a familiar formula. And as I get into this a little bit, you will recognize this from certainly every modern epic movie you've ever seen. Often this is called the leading story template of the millennial generation, and they're quite right. All right, 1, they are in a comfort zone. So you start off with your character in a place of comfort. So, you're setting the scene for the audience. You got the kid, he's at home, he's happy, he doesn't know grandpa's coming yet. I know I'm going back to that movie a lot, but whatever. All right. 2, now we go back to the fundamental need we talked about when we were discussing Vonnegut's work. But they want something. So again, the want, the need, très important. All right. As a result of wanting that something, they enter into an unfamiliar situation. Very important, right? You go to Jaws and now it's like, I got to kill the shark, but I got to go and do something crazy and talk to people and see if I don't know what I'm doing. So you want people in a place of discomfort. Eventually, he's got number 4 here, they adapt to it. They kind of figure out and say, okay, I think I kind of know what I want and how this kind of works, right? Then number 5, they actually get what they want. So he's gone past falling action, climax, all that. He's got number 6 is very interesting. They pay a heavy price for it. They go back to their familiar situation, but having changed. So this, in effect, is almost a combination of A plot and B plot, action plot and emo plot kind of together. But I'm offering it as, I guess you could use it as either one or for both, but it's excellent for the emotional plot, the B plot. Now you look at this, and I don't know how many movies this makes you think about, but Don't tell me this ain't Star Wars. Holy crap. It's both A New Hope and what was that? The Force Awakens. They were the same movie. It's Harry Potter. It's Lord of the Rings. You want to be biblical? It's Jesus. I mean, it's the same, you know. Harry Potter, I'm just an ordinary kid. No, you're not. I'm not. No, you're this super special guy who's going to go to Hogwarts. And wow, what the hell is that? Oh my God, now there's this guy got, what? The ultimate evil. I got to fight him. Yikes. Hey, I did it. I defeated him. But now I'm not the same guy anymore. I know I'm this heavy duty chosen guy who's got a, but I gotta always go back to my people and still be them with them. And that's cool. But I've learned something now. I'm changed. I'm different. So it shows you the character arc, if you will, you know, the emo plot that a character goes through. So it's an excellent template for your B plot. In fact, if you want, it never occurred to me till now, you can actually use the Vonnegut for your A and this for your B, your main and your sub. You can do that if you so desire, all right? Because in movies, people definitely want to see a character run a gamut. They want to see somebody change. You don't want somebody to be the same at the end as they were at the beginning. You're going to feel cheated. They don't necessarily have to change in a huge way. It's not like, suddenly, you know, Hannibal Lecter is going to stop eating people. Guy, no. But you do want to see a change there. You want to see a character arc, all right? That said, here's an important distinction if you're going to write a comedy. You don't want to see it in a comedy. In a drama, you want to see, say, The Queen's Gambit, this naive little redheaded chess-playing Anne of Green Gables orphan type suddenly become this mature, dysfunctional, brilliant, savvy, one-up on the world woman. You want to see that for sure. But in Legally Blonde, you don't want to see Elle Woods suddenly become maybe the toast of the town, sure. But you don't want her suddenly to shed her blonde hair and become an intellectual. No, man. I don't want to see Inspector Clouseau suddenly, oh, hey, there's a rake there. I'm not going to step on that. That was close. No. In comedy, you don't want somebody to change. Maybe a petit peu, you know, a little bit, but not a lot. What changes in comedy is the world around them changes because of their presence in it. And it's because comedy is based a lot on infantilization. It's a kid in an adult world. It's an overgrown kid in an adult world. That's why everybody loves Elf. Oh, it's Christmas. We got to watch Elf. Big, goofy Will Ferrell acting like a kid around all these adults. The whole fish out of water thing. Ah, it's so funny. He's so young and naive and gosh. And you love that. But you don't want to see Elf suddenly at the end say, you know, learned a lot this Christmas. Off goes the stupid costume. And from now on, I'm just going to be like a civil servant. No, you want him to stay the same, but you want him to have changed the world of which he was a part. You want the rough, gruff adults to say, you know, I learned a lot from that guy, that it's good to be in touch with your inner child and to be young and naive sometimes. And there's a lot to learn from a simple guy like that. So if you're writing a comedy, make sure that your main character doesn't go through too big an emotional arc. Certainly not a life-changing one, all right? But if you're writing a drama, for sure, go for it, all right? All right, those are story templates. I have now stopped sharing. My mother told me never to do that, but I did it nevertheless. All right, 8:30, I want to go through a couple of other little quick things just to finish off the fundamentals. So you got your hook, you got your plot. Characters, your character is very, very much based on what they want or need. Once you figure out story, and once you figure out the want or the need, your character will inevitably grow organically out of that. So I got these guys, right? And they really, really need to rob a bank because one of the guys, his wife is dying. She needs a life-saving operation. They're in the States. They don't have the money, and they're only going to have the money if they rob this bank. I'm just kind of riffing here. That want, that need is going to tell me who my characters are. Okay, what do I need here? This guy's probably older if his wife's, you know, falling apart. So it's an older guy. Obviously, he's big-hearted because here he is doing this thing for his wife. He obviously loves her very much, or he did something really bad and he feels really guilty and he's got to make it up to her. That's my choice as a writer, but there's got to be a reason there why he's doing what he's doing. What else? Obviously, this guy's got a criminal background, or if he doesn't know what he's doing, he's the kind of guy who likes to take big, crazy chances. And suddenly your whole character gets developed simply because, you know, the action told you who needs to be there behind the wheel of that action. So that's where character comes from. Now, that said, some people like to write character backgrounds because that still sounds like thin ice to them. So they'll sit down and they'll write an entire A&E biography for that character. You're welcome to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. All right. So you sit down and you figure out who this person was from childhood all the way through until the moment where the show or the movie begins. And you keep that with you as a source of reference. So if you ever get lost, you can go back to that. So you go, I don't know, man, like the guy leaves evidence at the scene of the crime. Is he the kind of guy who would do that? And you go through your character profile and you go, yeah, he would, because I said here when he was younger, his dad was always berating him for the smallest things, like losing his mittens. So it's just, of course he'd do that. It's a habit left over from childhood. Okay, I'm good. So you could do that, and that way, you know, you'll always be in tune with who your character is. You won't have actors screaming at you saying, what does he want? I don't get it. Because at all times, you'll know what the guy wants. So that's good. But you don't necessarily need to do that. That's just a net over a tightrope that you can have. I personally don't do it. I just write the story and let the character come out of the story. But if I'm stuck, I'll stop and I'll do it. I'll go, I don't get this. Why can't I make this guy do what I want him to do? And then I'll write out his life story and I'll go, that's why. Because this guy's never taken a chance in his life. And now I've got him doing these crazy things like robbing a bank. Okay, you can do that. Also, make sure when you're developing a character, this is a good to have. I would definitely recommend it. A friend of mine who is a Governor General winning playwright, Colleen Murphy, gave me this piece of advice. It's a great one. She said, make sure all of your characters have a beating heart. In other words, that they're really alive. You kind of feel them in 3 dimensions. The audience has a serious emotional investment in them. Easy to say. How do you do it? Again, we go back to psychology, excuse me. And that is often a matter of making visible to an audience a character's pain, i.e., what is the thing that hurts them in life the most? Sometimes you don't have to spell out in a big way, but as long as the audience senses it, there will be an emotional investment on that part. And once there's an emotional investment, they'll follow those characters anywhere. They might even excuse the most extreme actions. It doesn't matter. A great example on TV was Dexter. This guy's a serial killer. Have you seen what he does to people? He'll kidnap a guy, he'll tape him to a table, and he'll take a Black & Decker drill, and he'll stick it, and you're watching this guy. Why would I watch this guy? Why would I care for some guy who does that? Well, because they do a great job of telling you what this guy's pain is. And they have childhood flashbacks, which you can do if you want. They have a backstory. They've obviously, done their backstory on the character, like I said. And they show you that this guy from an early age knew that he was born with this weird capacity. His dad told him he had it, told him you're going to be alien from the rest of society. You're going to be an island unto yourself. You're not going to be able to have healthy relationships with other people. You're just going to be able to fool most of the people most of the time. And you're going to have an urge every now and again to go out and kill people. Wow, that's a hell of a burden for a, teenage kid. And because you know that, you're like, oh man, the poor guy. And you see him try to kind of connect with his girlfriend, but he can't get intimate with her. He can't do it. And you see him with his colleagues, and he can only kind of go so far with them. And you see that this guy is emotionally trapped. And because you feel for him like that, you'll follow him every step of the way. They added something else which went a long way, which was they made sure that he committed his crimes, grisly as they were, in the name of goodness, the right kind of vengeance. So he didn't do it to just anybody. He didn't cut up little old ladies. He made sure it was a little old lady who was going out killing people. So he was an avenger, a kind of an avenging angel. So you like that about him too. So he was kind of a good bad guy or a bad good guy, however you want to see it. And so because of that, you cared about this guy intensely, all right? Because you knew his pain. You knew what his pain was. Another one is House, Hugh Laurie. House was a jerk. I don't want that guy as a doctor. Are you kidding? You see the way he treated his colleagues and he treated his patients, and he was condescending and he was snippy and he was like, I don't get this guy's brilliant. Get this idiot away from me. But you didn't feel like that because you felt for this guy. You knew that he'd been in an accident, that he was hopped up on all kinds of painkillers, that he could solve every complex medical problem in the world, but the guy couldn't help himself. He couldn't solve his own problems. And because you felt for him, you felt this sense of him being trapped inside himself. You watched him do his thing and you excused him almost anything. All right. So find out what someone's big button is, what their baggage is, like they used to say in the 70s, what their pain is. And again, you don't have to do it every single time. And you don't have to do it if it's a series. But you do have to do it just to some small degree, enough so that an audience goes, okay, I get it. I'll follow this guy anywhere because I feel for them. Very, very important. All right. So that in a nutshell will help you a lot develop characters. All right. All right. You get past your characters. Something else, actually, one last thing very important about characters. When you get to the climax or the falling action part, a great thing to have your characters do at that point, to make very, very high drama, put them in a situation where they have to make an extremely difficult choice. You can argue that that's really what high drama is, where you get to the climax and this guy that you've spent an hour and a half wondering about is in a situation now where you go, holy shoot, what what's he going to do? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? I don't know. And that almost always works. Almost always works. Greatest example of all time, William Styron's great book that was turned into a movie, Sophie's Choice. There's this woman corralled by the Nazis, and they give her a very tough choice. She has 2 kids, and they say, which one do you want us to take to the death camps, the girl or the boy? Wow, man. Can you imagine? I hope that's not based on a true story. Of course, I suspect it is. But can you imagine? And that's the climax of that movie, that this character has to make an extraordinarily tough decision. So you want to put your characters in a place where they got to make a tough decision. How many times have you seen movies where action flicks, oh man, I got to save these people, but if I save these people, I blow this case, and heck, I'm gonna forget about this, and I'm gonna save these people. You want to put people in a situation where they got to make a tough choice. You want the audience to bite their nails. That's how you do it. All right. Then you get to dialogue. Very, very briefly, because like I said, time's kind of at a premium now. This is one of these things where we talked about this before with dialogue. Some people think it can be taught. Other people think, no way, forget it. You can't do it. I think it can to some degree. And I've got some, I've got some advice I could give you on it. All right. First, it's how to properly develop your scenes. If you got well-developed scenes, the mechanics of your scenes are strong, then inevitably you're going to end up with some good dialogue, even if you don't think you can write it. I'm going to try to share a screen again here, see what happens. All right, I will get rid of Rick and Morty. Can I move him? Oh, I got to stop share Rick and Morty. Okay, and I got to share a new here, so bear with me. Now Rick and Morty are still there. How do I collapse Rick and Morty? Whoops. Collapsed everybody else instead. Okay, there we go. All right, you guys all see my desktop? It's a fascinating shade of blue.
Yep.
Okay, good. You're now going to see something that, here it is, my dynamic sheet. All right, we're going to talk about something called dynamics. Can all see this? Dynamics?
Yes.
Okay. What are dynamics? Dynamics are the things that people have to take apart in a scene, discuss as a scene, your characters. So every scene you write is loaded with something. It's elliptical. It's got tension in it. It's got something that needs to be confronted and looked at and taken apart. Otherwise, you don't have drama. Writing a script is no different than devising a video game. If you go back to the early days of video games, Super Mario's got to rescue Princess Peach up in a tower. And there's all these obstacles to getting there. He's at a moat, and now he's got to kill the alligators. He's got to figure out which door, and he's got to collect all these coins until he gets to the end. You're doing the same thing. All that Vonnegut stuff I gave you, all that Dan Harmon stuff. Really, it's just a more sophisticated version of Super Mario. You got a character, you got a whole bunch of obstacles they got to dismantle to get to the end goal. Scenes are just that on a subscale, smaller scale inside the bigger narrative, all right? So here's an example from a scene. I just made this up. A popular TV judge, so Judge Judy, the hot bench, that kind of thing, is late for one of his TV tapings. While hurriedly backing out of his driveway, he runs over his neighbor's 4-year-old who's there playing on his tricycle. Despite inconclusive evidence, the jury nevertheless finds the TV judge guilty, and the real judge, emphasizing that he feels that the TV judge's show is a mockery of the justice system, awards him an extremely stiff sentence. After the trial, the TV judge confronts the real judge in his chambers. So, there's a lot to talk about there. So the trial ends, the jury comes down, the verdict comes down, the TV judge is meeting with the real judge. You can bet there's going to be a heated scene with these two guys. The audience is going, ooh, this should be good, because they have a very loaded dynamic here. So then you have to decide by kind of riffing inside your head, spitballing inside your head, what it is these guys have to talk about. And I always say for a good scene, because your scenes can only be so long, pick 3 or 4 of them. You might think of 20, but think of the 3 or 4 best ones. So for this particular scene, I was like, okay, well, they're going to talk about the extremely stiff sentence. Hey, man, what? How could you give me? Are you kidding me? All right. They'll probably talk about jealousy. Oh, I get it. You're jealous that I've got a TV show and you don't. All right. They'll probably talk about the feelings about the TV show. Hey, man, that show is a mockery. You call that, you're making fun of good, hardworking judges, what have you. And no doubt they'll talk about the jury decision. Look, what can I say? That's what the jury came down with. You got to respect it. You know how the system works. So now I know the big things, the big buttons that these guys are going to talk about over the course of these scenes. Then when I've got all that worked out, I come up with what I think is the best order for the dynamics. So I decided, and you go with your gut largely, but I decided I'm going to start with the extremely stiff sentence. Gives me a nice explosive in. Gives me a, man, what? How the heck could you give me 2 years? Are you nut? What kind of? Okay. Then I'm going to go with the rebuttal from the legit judge. Hey, man, that's what the jury came up with, and them's the breaks, and you know the system, and that's how it works. And then I'm going to use the feelings about the TV show. Oh, I get it. I know what this is about. I got a TV show, and you don't. You're jealous. And then I'm going to get into the whole jealousy thing. What? How the hell can you say, get out, now, out? And that's my scene. And I should have a nice, tight scene there that's got some good dynamics, some good kind of up and down, right? Starts off really explosive, a little bit of calm, starts to build up again. Boom! Big climax at the end, all right? Now, other writers might rearrange that information in a different way and do it differently. That's completely up to them. Again, you go with your gut. But you'll notice a pattern here. I've written it. Notice a pattern. It's the mechanics of the situation first, i.e. what happened, and then the emotional residue after. So again, we're balancing action and emotion. In this case, I actually started with the mechanics. What happened? Man, you gave me a crappy sentence. Are you kidding? So we reiterate for the audience what happened. And the jury decision, hey, man, that's what they said. And then once I'm done with the visible action, let's say, we could get into the emotional layer underneath. Oh, I get it, man. This is about jealousy. No, it's not. Your show is stupid. And you can go back forth that way. You don't necessarily have to open that way, but it's the easiest way for an audience to be able to follow you. And what you want to do at the end of the day, the number one biggest sin you can make when you write, which is why those fill-in sheets are great, is confuse an audience. Once someone's like, what? I don't get it. I thought that guy would, but who's that? I don't get this show. I walked out of that movie. Did you understand? What the hell? They took a turn. You don't want to give people that. Aaron Sorkin, if you take his masterclass, guy behind West Wing and The Social Network, all kinds of stuff. He always says, after I hand something to anybody and they read it, the first thing I ask them is, did you understand it? Could you follow it? Did it make sense? Because if you can't do that, you're in big trouble. That's why even if your B plot, your emo plot, your psychology stuff, kind of soft, it's not great, maybe it doesn't make the impact it kind of should, but your A plot, your mechanics are great, you still got something. Whereas if your emotional stuff is great and it's fabulous and wow, but the box it's supposed to be in doesn't make sense and people can't follow it, they're just going to say, why are all these people shouting and overreacting? Why are they all up in arms? What's going on? So you really want to make sure, again, that you're holding someone's hand through everything step by step. Story is very, very important. All right. So you can do that for yourself. You could give yourself, write out those dynamics. Again, I'll include this in the toolkit that Pal's going to post when you're writing out your scenes. Once you've got your dynamics worked out like that, you're off to the races writing dialogue. All right. So I will just briefly touch on some dialogue pointers. All right. All right. Dialogue pointers. Let me find them here. Here we go. Three things. Remember these three things. Good dialogue is a matter of three things. Number one, talked about it earlier, having an ear. Being able to appropriate the way that somebody talks. Absorbing people enough that you know what I sound like compared to what David Globerman sounds like. And if you wrote for me and my pseudo Jim Henson voice, you would never write this way for David. If you wrote for David, you'd never write that way for me. Writers collect voices. We don't know that that's what we're doing, but we are notorious eavesdroppers. My wife was also a writer. We go to restaurants, we start to talk, and then inevitably we're very quiet because we're doing this. Hey, did you hear that couple at the... Yeah, man, you know what's going on with... And in the car afterwards, wow, that guy was really mad. And you know what he said to her? Did you catch what he said? Are you the one with it? You absorb the way sounds that people have. I can tell you things that happened in my life 50 years ago from totally inconsequential people, and I can tell you exactly how they said it, the music that they used to make the statement, and I could spit it out onto a page. I think every real writer can do this. If you can't do it naturally, you could learn to do it just by telling yourself, okay, I gotta start doing that. All right. Okay, number two, what I call internal casting. I'll get to that. And number three, very important, concision, making it tight. Appropriating this way somebody talks, we talked about that. Just be aware of how one person sounds different from another person. Very important, comedy. For years, there were veteran comedy writers, and they could write great for one comic, and they couldn't write for another guy. And the reason they could write great for one guy and they couldn't write for another guy is they got that guy's sound and they didn't get that guy's sound. They couldn't figure it out. So if I'm going to write for Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm, I know I'm going to write lines that kind of sound like this. I'm not the you're the guy who's upset, not me. I don't know what it's going to sound like that. All right. Conversely, if I'm going to write for Trevor Noah and I don't do Trevor Noah, I'm not going to write like that because he doesn't stammer. He's not nervous. I'm going to write in a very concise, logical, in your face, pugnacious kind of way. It's going to have a different staccato rhythm to it. So, Neil Simon, always the great playwright, always said that when he was a comedy writer, he could write great stuff for Sid Caesar, could never write for Jackie Gleason. Somebody said, how could you not write for Jackie Gleason? He said, I couldn't hear the guy say the lines. I couldn't write it. All right, pal. He said, I couldn't conform to that sound. I couldn't do it. Groucho Marx would take every single script anybody ever gave him and say, great, thanks. And then he'd take out a pen and he would rewrite all of his lines. And he said he never changed a line. The punchline was exactly the same, setup and the punchline, but he would change the phraseology because guys didn't write it the way that he would say it. So he had to rewrite it so that it would sound like he would say it. And they would try out, all their movies were tried out on the road. Most people don't know that. They did stage versions first. And they would try it out to see if it would work in the movie. And there would be lines that would fall flat. And then one day he'd say, I got it. And he would figure out the same line. And he would rewrite it. And he would say it the way he figured out how to say it, and people would laugh hysterically. And it was because he finally learned how to put the line in his own voice. All right, so that's that. Okay, internal casting, this might help you. What I mean is, when you write these characters that you're going to write out of your hook and your plot, you cast them in your mind aspirationally. And the nice part is you got a palette that includes the whole wide world. So you can use movie stars, and you can use your neighbor, and you can mix and match them, and who cares? The only thing that's important is that they sound like, providing they're concise, they sound like real people, real characters on the page, and ultimately in the movie or on the TV show. I once had a romantic comedy. I'm telling a tale out of school here, and everybody loved it. But they all say, Dan, that female character, I don't believe her, man. There's something missing. And it was based on my wife. I wrote it using my wife's voice. And I'm like, okay, I'll try somebody else. So then I used my neighbor's voice. And then I tried a colleague's voice. It didn't change the content. It changed the way that she would say the content. And then I started doing my backstory exercise, and I started looking at the components of this person's character, and I went, holy shit, my mother-in-law. I wrote my mother-in-law as the young female character, and everyone went, wow, man, you nailed it. This is dynamite. Look what you did. Man, the life you brought to this. It's feisty. It's believable. It's whatever. Now, I don't need to go around telling people that process. That's you, the writer. That's a secret between you and you. Like when you take somebody home from a bar and you're tired, but you got to think about somebody else. You're effectively thinking about somebody else than your character when you're writing your script. But it doesn't matter. All that matters is that it sounds at the end of the day like a real character, real person. If I hear Robert De Niro, I'll write the way that he speaks. If I might even have him in a scene with my daughter because there's a young woman character, and I think, oh, it's gonna sound like my daughter, so I'll write my daughter for that. Another name drop. Did a movie with Michael Moriarty. Didn't know he was going to be in it, and wrote him a very, very long speech, which in movies you should rarely do. I was still learning. Fortunately, I had it toward the end where the audience, I hope, was hooked, so they stuck with it. And I had a good friend of mine who I envisioned in my mind, and I had in my ear, and I used his voice for the character. When Michael Moriarty, great actor who was on Law and Order for many years, came and he read this passage, I sat there and I went, I don't know who the hell wrote this, but it's not me because I'm not that good. Wow. And I didn't write it for him. I didn't know him from Beans. I mean, I knew him from TV. I don't think I could have used his voice. It didn't kind of stick in my ear. But I used my friend's voice. But when that guy said it, wow, did it sound great and engaging and real. And it's not just because he was a great actor, but it's because I wrote it with a real voice. Doesn't matter if it was the voice of my neighbor, it made the character sound like a real person. So that's what I mean by internal casting. Think of someone in your real life, or it could be a movie star, whatever you want, mix and match, who is akin to the character, who is the main character or the main characters in whatever you're going to write, right? So that's internal casting. And the third one, very important, is concision. By that, I mean, you got to make it tight. It's got to be really tight. Why does it have to be tight? Because a TV show is a half hour to an hour long. Excuse me. And by the way, generally 1 page equals 1 minute. So if you're wondering how long your script has to be, if you're writing an hour and a half movie, you need 90 pages. A 2-hour movie, you need 120 pages. If you're writing a half-hour TV show, you need, if it's network television and they have commercials, you need 22 pages, 22 minutes. Or 44 pages if it's a drama. If it's going to be something, say, for Netflix, and it's a true half hour or a true hour, you need 30 pages. You need 60 pages. Also know, by the way, that with comedy, you might need more pages, and that's okay, because it tends to play faster. It's all zippy, funny little lines. And because it's zippy, funny little lines that go by real fast, it eats up a lot of paper. So you might need more pages there. You might say, man, I got 40 pages here. Oh, yeah, it's okay. It plays as a half hour. Oh, good. Drama's often the opposite. You've got, man, I've only got 25 pages. That's okay, man. It ran an hour because there was a lot of close-ups, a lot of people thinking, lots of pauses, what have you. But at least until you know how it's going to play, you want to do your due diligence. You want to make sure that you're right. 90 pages, 120 pages, 22 or 44, 30 or 60. Anyway, because TV is divided into these little units and movies are only an hour and a half, 2 hours long, you don't have a lot of time. So when you write dialogue, you write scenes. Your scenes are not very long. Next time you write this stuff, time it. Time how long the scenes are, and you'll see they're very short. They're very, very short scenes. That's why you don't have a lot of dynamics. You don't have 20 things they could talk about in a scene. You don't have that kind of time. You got time for 3 or 4 things they could talk about in a scene, and they got to talk about it zippy, all right? So good rule of thumb, come in late and leave early. I used to go to music festivals in Ottawa, and I'm like, what's with Ottawa, man? Everybody comes late and they leave early. They're all free in those days. Someone say, yeah, but it's because it's free. And then I realized, it's a good writing rule anyway. You come in late and you leave early. So I could say, hey, how you doing? Good. How are you? I'm fine. Good, good, good. You having a good day? Yeah, I'm having a good day. By the way, last night, a bolt of lightning hit the roof, and we now have a huge hole. We have a what? First thing you do if somebody gave you that as a piece of writing, cut all that. Hello, how are you? Did you have a good night? Who cares? Get right to it. Start the scene with, okay, last night a bolt of lightning came by, and now look, we have a hole. What? And boom. So you're coming in late. You're coming in just when the action starts. All right. Unless there's a point to all the hemming and hawing. You're doing it on purpose because the character's nervous and he doesn't know how to break it to that. That would be different. But for the most part, all of the well and the and all of the small talk, you're dealing with major talk all the way here. There's no room for small talk unless the small talk is somebody, again, purposefully trying to avoid something. All right. It's active in its own passive way. The other one is, like I said, you leave early. So, you leave the scene with, oh, great, we got a hole in the roof. Well, now what the hell are we going to do? You know what? I got an idea. Boom. You don't say, I got an idea. Great. What is it? Guy goes into a long explanation of the idea. Guy says, I don't know. It's a good idea, but it's no. You end on a climactic point. You end on, I got an idea. Boom. You go to the next scene. You can mess with time, so the next scene can be the next day, an hour later, 3 days, after they've fixed it, while they're trying to fix it, what have you. All right. It's, if you all know your grammar, you know what ellipses are. ... Right? And you want to end every scene. It's almost as if you want to come in after a ... but you definitely want to leave on a ... You read a murder mystery book, at the end of each chapter, there's an implied ellipses. There's a ... So you go, I realized there's no way the serial killer could have been my wife, but could it have been my neighbor? Chapter 3. Whoa! Maybe it is the neighbor. I got to get to chapter 3. I was up all night reading that book. I couldn't put it down. Well, one of the reasons you couldn't put it down was all of the little implied ... at the end of the scene. And if you watch TV or movies, every scene, more or less, ends that way. It's, again, going back to a musical analogy. If you know anything about jazz, jazz does that a lot of flatted fifths. Getting technical here, but there's always like a little edge, and then the next phrase starts. And you always want to make sure that you're kind of, leaving your audience on the edge of a cliff. Doesn't have to be a huge cliff, but just a little bit of cliff at the end of each one of your little scenes of dialogue. All right. All right. Look at that. 9 o'clock. To time. Woohoo. I'll go to the chat one more time and just cherry pick a little bit. Don't want to keep you here forever. Let's see. Someone says, is the hook more of a tagline? And they put long line. It's actually log, L-O-G. And the log line, oops, sorry, I missed that. Okay, sorry, that's disappeared into the netherworld. My apologies. Are there any reputable online screenplay courses you could recommend? I would, it's kind of pricey. I talked about it earlier. But these master classes that they offer, I think it's called master class. There are a couple of great practitioners there, and it's very long. It's 26 little lessons all broken up, sometimes 35 in little 10-minute increments. So you can skip things you already know, or you could go through it all. And you've got Aaron Sorkin on it, guy behind West Wing, The Social Network, Moneyball, offering. You're going to hear a lot of what I told you, and then also his own spin on things, and certainly examples from his own career. And Steve Martin, yay, Steve Martin, one of my faves, teaches a very good one on comedy, and he'll teach you the ins and outs of writing comedy. So I would, like I said, it's a little pricey, but they do discount it every now and again. So that's worth checking out. Oh, yes, this one's very important. It says, you mentioned resources where we can actually send scripts. Yes. And in fact, if I go to the, I'm going to try to cut and paste something in the chat room right now. I'm going to see if that works. Everybody's still there, I trust. I'm going to go into where those resources are. But again, I'll ask Pal to put these up on their site. And I'm going to cut some resources here. And I'm going to put them up for you. We did get to the formatting, but one of these links will actually give you free screenwriting software. So I'm going to go into the chat here, and I'm going to cut and paste all of this. Did you get all of it or just one of them? Oh, there they all are. Okay. So like I said, I'll make sure that the PAL guys have these too. But the first one here is a free screenwriting software. So if you're wondering how the formatting works, you can download this. You're not going to get a virus. It's very reputable. It's all free. Save the cost of $250 for Movie Magic or whatever's au courant these days. And it's just, it'll click your script together for you effectively. So when you want to do a scene, you click on action and you can type in your action. If you want to do, where a character goes, you click on character. It'll bring your cursor right to where you put in the name of the character. You click on dialogue. It'll bring your cursor right to where your dialogue goes. It does the work for you. It's probably got a free demo. I haven't checked out whether or not it has a free demo. It probably does. Check it out. And let's say now you've written your script based on my sage advice, and you want to go shop it somewhere. What you'll want is an agent. You want to bring it to a writing agent because they're the people who, for a cut, are going to get you work. And I put up the Writers Guild of Canada Screenwriters Resources website. And they list all of the agents in Canada. Most of them are in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. But they are the ones who, if they like what you've written, because you got to write some samples and give them some samples, pick an existing show or an original movie, what have you, and give it to them. And if they like your samples, they'll say, I'll take you on as a client, and they'll start plugging you to prospective producers. And also another way, my buddy Rick Colbars, who teaches screenwriting at Algonquin College currently, encourages a lot of his students to do this. And it's to enter contests. And there is a great resource for all kinds of screenwriting, everything, called studiobinder.com. And I've put up the contest page. But anything you want to know about screenwriting is on this site. It's a great site. And they list the au courant contests that usually for a nominal reader's fee you can enter. And they're, the top ones are pretty legit. And Rick has had a couple of students who won some pretty cool stuff. I think he had one student who got an apprenticeship with Disney, was brought down to California and wrote stuff for Disney for a year. Somebody who won something called the Peter Ustinov Screenwriting Award. I don't know what it means, but you get money and you get to meet important people. So it's another good way to get it in. So that covers off our very brief marketing part of the evening. All right. We're all good, folks. Thank you for joining us.